Welcome learners. I welcome you to the session International Purchase. In many cases, materials, parts or components required may not be available within the country and might have to be imported from abroad. Purchasing from abroad involves procedures which are quite different from purchasing within the country. There are two major factors involved in importing materials from abroad. A contract with the foreign supplier for the purchase of materials. This involves primarily a clear understanding of the quality of the product and the price and other terms of the sale. The procedures involved in the import may be different. First, one has to obtain, if required, an import license for the material. The other is the arrangement of the payment to the supplier, payment for insurance, shipping, customs, etc. Now we can see about import sourcing. After a decision has been taken to import a particular item, the first step would be to identify and select the supplier from whom the import can be made. International purchasing has several problems unlike purchasing from within the country. Even if we are able to identify the country of a manufacturer who can supply the product, it is possible that the rules and regulations of the country may not permit the exports, or the government may have some regulations which may not allow the imports from any other country. The second problem is ensuring that the goods are purchased competitively or of required quality. The goods are available in the required quantity and in time. Unlike an Indian supplier, we would have very little information about the foreign supplier except what may be found in the written document or in a catalog. There are several sources of information on foreign suppliers like journals and periodicals, both Indian and international, which identify foreign manufacturers, as also several organizations, both Indian and international, which provide information on the possible sources. Apart from the trade directories, the embassies and the consultants of foreign countries generally have commercial or trade counselors who have a lot of information about exports from their countries. It would be most desirable to compile a list of all possible sources instead of deciding on the first name that one obtains. The data from the national and international sources must be tabulated and analyzed to identify the most promising ones. Some of the considerations that may go into the source selection as follows. Ensure that there is no political embargo on imports from the foreign country concerned. In certain cases, import trade may be very highly restricted and may be confined to a small number of items and only as per the bilateral agreement between the two nations. Geographical location may be an important criterion. Take for example, obtaining goods from Latin America may involve very high freight charges. Some countries are known for maintaining high standards in quality, especially with regard to the capital goods, namely the machinery and equipment, or industrial raw materials, instruments, etc. In such cases, it would be desirable to focus on the major developed countries like the United States of America, Japan, etc. In certain cases, it would be necessary to have an efficient after-sales service, and in such cases, it is beneficial to select the suppliers who have agents in India to render such services. With regard to the mass consumption like edible oils, several sources would be available and it must be desirable to float an international tender inviting suppliers to quote. The same applies to the industrial raw materials also. An important source of information would be the catalogs of foreign manufacturers. Many foreign companies have their agents in India, and through an advertisement in an Indian newspaper, one can obtain the information about sources. So you must know about the various sources in the foreign countries by knowing the newspapers, and you have to float tenders and receive the quotations from the foreign manufacturers. In certain cases, there may be only one source of supply of a specific type of machinery or raw material. In many cases, the imports may be made only through the canalized agencies like state trading corporations, minerals and metals trading corporations, etc. And one is not allowed to make any import directly. This is to have a control over the volume of imports. So the government of India has made certain restrictions that in certain manufacturing goods or in certain intermediate parts, it must be done only through the corporations meant by the government. So these are all the basic considerations that one has to go for the source selection. First one is you must go for the political environment, and you must go for the legal environment and the geographical situation and the number of suppliers available, and go for the international tenders through the papers, and we have to read about the legal restrictions that are made by the home country. Now we shall see what are all the different methods of foreign buying. There are two usual methods of buying goods from abroad, either directly or indirectly. Direct buying involves having one's own arrangements within the company. For example, a specialized imports department does all the work relating to the imports, right from obtaining a license, sourcing, quality inspection, clearing, forwarding, etc. So direct buying is he has to make all the arrangements for buying, and he has to make arrangements regarding the license receiving, then sourcing, then the inspection of the quality, clearing activities, etc. So he has to do all the activities. In case of indirect imports, one can arrange imports with an intermediary. So you can go for an agent, or you can go for an trader, or an import-export house, or a public sector corporation in case of canalized imports, as we saw earlier. So it must be done only through the public trading corporations. So these are all called as the indirect imports. Agents. Agents will be the persons who will be in charge for importing the goods. These import agents are those persons who has to arrange imports of a certain specific goods, and in many cases they are only for the specific countries. The agents normally charge a commission which is mostly payable by the overseas suppliers. However, they may charge a fee from the importers also. It is usually difficult to locate an appropriate agent. One of the methods would be to contact the clearing and the forwarding shipping agents. So these agents will have a contact with these import agents, and the import agents will be charging a small fee for undertaking all the activities. Export houses and trading houses are allowed to import the items for use in their own factories and are for selling to others. Some of these companies also operate on stock and sale basis, and hence they import items from abroad for distribution and sale. Because of their wide operations in the overseas markets, they are usually in a position to obtain information on good overseas sources for the product one needs. A list of registered export trading houses may be obtained from the Federation of Indian Exports Organization. So from this organization, we can get the export or trading houses who are all registered with them. In case of direct importing, one of the most essential requirements is to have a specialized training staff who are familiar with the import policy and procedures relating to all aspects of imports like transportation, exchange payments, clearance of goods, customs duties, etc. So in case of this direct importing, we must have a trained staff that is appointed in the company who will be very familiar with the import procedures. Correspondence with the foreign suppliers is also possible, and in these cases the language will be the main barrier, but in such cases it is desirable to send a translator, and this translator will be in charge for translating the messages, and they must be very aware of the languages of the other countries, and other countries from that they are going to import. So whenever the correspondence with the foreign suppliers are made, the languages should be taken care of, and if the manufacturer is not aware of that language, then he must appoint a translator for this purpose to have the communication in a correct sense. So the decoding and encoding must be done in a correct sense. Then buying agents abroad. There are several buying agents overseas through whom such purchases are made. However, one has to be very careful in such cases because quite a number of them are known to indulge in a fraudulent practice. Suppose if you are going to engage an agent from the abroad, then you are not aware of their own integrity of those persons. So you must be very careful enough to select those agents from the abroad. If your good agent can be identified, then you have to communicate with the agent, giving him the full details of the imports, and you have to give the entire details of the company also. There are certain facts to be mentioned in the correspondence with the import agent, agents abroad. The products that are needed with the technical names in your specifications. What are the specifications we need? And again the purchase plan, the schedule of the purchases over a particular period of time. It may be 2 years or 3 years, and whatever time period you are required to plan, then you have to give a purchasing schedule or a purchasing plan depending upon the requirements of the company or the purchase policies of the company, and then the end use of that item and other details which are necessary to identify the particular product that is needed by the company. So if any export agent is appointed, then he has to give the entire information to those export agents regarding the products, regarding the time we need, and the technical specifications, standardizations, etc. While giving that information about the company and also the product that we are need, then it should be desirable to get the complete details about the agent status and his business also. Because we must also be aware of the agent's business. So he must know about the agent's status and the foreign companies and the businesses he is carrying on, and the integrity of that person should also be entered into. The information that may be asked from the export agents may be as follows. First one is the product that he deals with this business, and how long he is in that business, the period of his business, that is the age life of your business. Whether he is also a manufacturer of the same product or any other product. Suppose he is engaged in that particular product, or he is also engaged in the connected products. Whether he is a sole selling agent or a local agent of the manufacturer he represents. So he has to say whether he is a sole selling agent or not. He will be selling only that particular product, or he may be a local agent of that particular country. And when he is an agent for the other companies, other countries, then he has to say about the country to which he is an agent. And especially when we are importing, he has to find out whether he is an agent for the Indian country. Then the volume of his own overseas turnover, and including that of his supplies made to his customers in India. So what is the total volume of sales of his own business, and what is the proportion of the sales in this business to India. Then the rate of commission he is going to charge, and what is the commission to be paid, whether it is as a proportion to the price of the product, or whether it is an agreed percentage, etc. Then the names and addresses of his own bankers to remit the amount. Then whether he provides any other service other than the shipping service, whether he is going to carry on the insurance, carriage, etc. So he has to decide about all these factors. First one is what is the business he is engaged with, and how long he is there, and whether he is dealing with a single product or multiple products, whether he is a sole selling agent or he is an agent for the local area, and whether he is an agent for the Indian companies, what is his own total turnover, and what is the proportion of turnover to India, and what is his commission he is going to charge, whether it is a proportion to the price or it's a fixed percentage, and the names and addresses of his own bankers, and again what is the other services he is going to provide. So it is desirable to obtain a standard specimen agency agreement from him, and you have to read out the complete agreement and understand all the terms and conditions, and the company has to consult a legal advisor or a legal solicitor of his own company before entering into the contract. Then approaching the foreign suppliers. If a letter to the foreign suppliers is identified by the company from various sources, then information should be clearly indicate a small profile of the company and a detailed description of goods and materials that the company is intended to import from the foreign country. Then a detailed correspondence wherein the company has to express its own intent to purchase the material and what is desirable by the company. And again, he has to make a request to the foreign supplier to send a pro forma invoice and request the foreign supplier to send the best possible price and other terms of the purchase. The supplier's offer should also include in precise terms the product size and the specifications, the price and the other terms of delivery, insurance and freight charges, the shipment charges, delivery period, packing, labeling, etc. And again the payment terms also. On the receipt of the pro forma invoices from the 3 or more suppliers, a decision has to be taken on whom the purchase order should be placed. So the quotations must be received from all the suppliers involving all the terms of the contract, and then you have to decide to whom the order has to be placed. The purchase order is almost identical one used in the domestic purchasing. Whatever order you are going to place it in the domestic market, the same way you have to place it in the foreign market also, but it includes the other customs charges and the other shipment charges. And what are all the steps that are involved in purchase from the foreign countries? Otherwise, we can call it as import purchase. First one is the need identification. Identify the need. First, what is the need for the import of a specific material? So, a prospective importer has to identify the need for the import of a specified material, and this must be prompted by various reasons, and he has to back up the information regarding the necessity for the import. And the decision should be taken only after the deliberations or discussions about the necessity to import a particular material. Because this need identification has to be first made as a primary step. Because any import that is made from the foreign country involves a foreign exchange. So we have to identify whether this need is essential or not. Then the in-depth study should be made. This in-depth study necessitates the import-export policies in force, and what about the various government regulations and legal regulations, what about the steps that has to be taken care of to follow the legal formalities, and whether it is a canalized item or not, whether it can be freely imported or not, what are the government restrictions regarding this. So all these in-depth study has to be made. And next step is going for the selection of a supplier or development of a source. So he has to locate the foreign sources, and he has to select a supplier. He has to obtain the information from various sources, the conditions and the offers of the conditions of the offer, and the enquiry should be made on involving the quotations. You have to involve the issue of tenders and receive the quotations from the prospective sources. The quotation should also be received in advance, and this quotations are to be analyzed by the company personnel, and he has to select the best quotation which is having the lowest price, and this evaluation and selections must be made in terms of the acceptability, and further negotiations will also be made with the selected shortlisted suppliers. Next is negotiations. On the basis of the data developed with respect of the selected few parties, negotiation should be carried out with them in order to determine the suppliers with whom the final contract has to be entered. The negotiations would also include the terms and conditions, the price, the exchange of the currency, then the shipping schedule, shipping charges, insurance, mode of carting, etc. So all these things should be negotiated in before entering into the contract. Then import license. On the basis of this firm offer from the foreign party, an import license if procured is applied for and obtained. Then contract should be entered on the basis of the negotiations concluded and between the supplier and the importer, and which must contain all the terms and conditions. This contract is necessary for various purposes concerning the banks, customs authorities, etc. Then opening letter of credit. The contract usually stipulates for obtaining a letter of credit by the importer in favor of the overseas supplier. For this, the importer approaches his own banker for getting the letter of credit opened, and the same is to be communicated to the supplier. Then the follow-up on shipment should be made. Upon the communication of the letter of credit to the supplier, the importer proceeds to follow up the shipment by having a constant rapport with the supplier. Then the shipping and insurance. Unless the contractor happens to be the cost insurance and freight type, the importer has to arrange for the freight insurance, etc. So if it is CIF, that is cost insurance and freight, the supplier will take over the charges. These arrangements have a serious impact over the lead time as well as the cost, because it has to be noted upon. Arrival of the documents. Once the shipment is effected, the foreign supplier proceeds to prepare the documents in conformity with the LMC, and that is your letter of credit, and submits them for the purposes of negotiation to his own bankers. Thereafter, these documents are forwarded by the foreign banker to the importer's banker in India for onward transmission to the importer. The importer at his end has to scrutinize these documents and ensure that they are strictly in conformity with the letter of credit. The documents required are said to be the commercial invoice, the packing list, certificate of origin, clearance bill or your bill of lading, abbey bill or your shipping bill, then marine insurance certificates, pre-shipment inspection certificates and other documents which are related to the letter of credit. Acceptance and payment of the documents. The documents are negotiated under letter of credit or duly presented to the importer through the bank that opened the letter of credit for acceptance and payment. If the documents are clean or free from any discrepancies, the importer is duty bound to accept the bill. The payment has to be made by the importer depending upon the tenure of the letter of credit. Clearance formalities. Once the materials arrive, the importers have to proceed further with the clearance formalities. He has to obtain the documents in original, that is a commercial invoice, bill of lading, packing list, certificate of origin and other certificates and declarations as may be necessary. In such case, these documents in original are not available due to the delay in their arrival. He can obtain a shipping guarantee from his own banker in favor of the shipping company or agents thereof, which will entitle him to obtain the possession of the material in the acceptance of the original documents. These documents are to be lodged with the customs authorities for approval and assessment of duty and payment thereof. As this process is very crucial, professional consultants may be engaged to avoid the difficulties. Next is the post clearance. Once the clearance is obtained from the customs authorities, steps have to be taken to obtain the physical possession of the material and have it to be transported to the place of the ultimate use or the consumption. This may include the engagement of the agents, arrangements for taking a midstream deliveries, especially when there is a congestion in the docks, arrangements for the handling and transportation, obtaining additional insurance for transit, storage, etc. This step extends up to the delivering of material at the final destination. Receipt and accounting. As soon as the imported material arrives at the final destination, it has to be duly stored in the appropriate manner. Legal formalities should be complied with before material is accounted for in the store's records. Thus, the import cycle comes to an end at this stage. It may be noted that the steps mentioned are said to be the detailed, detailed procedures in case of your imports. Let us now sum up the steps that have been involved in import purchase. First one is to identify the need, then have an in-depth study regarding the import and export policies, the legal environment, political environment, etc. Then select the supplier and the source development, finding out the sources and selecting a supplier based on the tenders issued. So you have to receive the quotations, analyze the quotation and then select it. Then go for the import license if needed, then entering into the contract. Before entering into the contract, the legal solicitors has to be consulted and opening the letter of credit, then follow up of your shipment, shipping and insurance, what are the terms of your shipping and insurance, then arrival of the documents, acceptance of the documents, clearance formalities, post clearance, then receipt and the accounting. Next we shall see about the import substitution. Substitution refers to the replacement of one material by the another for performing the same function. Import substitution on the other hand refers to the indigenous source of development so as to get the materials indigenously, to conserve the valuable foreign exchange, to reduce the cost of production and to encourage and develop the local industry and trade. So import substitution must be indigenous source of development. You have to get your materials indigenously, then conserve the value of exchange, that is you have to reduce the foreign payments and to reduce the cost of production and encourage the local industry. Import substitution is a national policy as a self-reliance. As a major objective, it goes a long way in achieving the favorable balance of payments. In India, various government departments help in achieving this objective. Large public sector organizations have set up an import substitution cells. The petroleum refineries have set up a technical development committee to give a fill up in the import substitution. But the responding organizations attribute a very slow progress in import substitutions due to the following causes. Technical experts of the organization are unwilling to take up the risk of indigenous items, and the drawings not readily available for several items in India, lack of indigenous production facilities, lack of inspection facilities, the quantity required for certain items are uneconomical and for manufacture cost uneconomical to manufacture due to the low demand, then high cost of production, then we have many power problems, due to that we have a delayed schedule, then the foreign collaborator will discourage the indigenous items. So these are all the reasons for the low progress in the import substitutions, namely the non-availability of technical experts, then the non-availability of the drawings, lack of your production facilities, then lack of inspection facilities, and the quantity required is to be produced. When it is produced within the country, it is said to be uneconomical. Then it increases the cost of production, and we have many power problems also. And the foreign collaborators are discouraging the indigenous items. Though we have these causes for the slow progress in the import substitution, we must have the, so we have to take up the steps to overcome these difficulties. Now let us see what are the problems in the import substitutions. Though our efforts have been said to be laudable in this regard, it does not mean that we don't have any problem in the field of import substitution. We suffer from many limitations which creates hindrances in this level. Various industries, central agencies, government departments and the Directorate General of Technical Development are also having some solutions for these problems. Now, what are the basic problems faced by the manufacturers in this import substitution? Usually, very tight specifications and standards are set by those who are on the authority without considering the limitations of the country. The specifications and standards set by the authorities are usually borrowed from foreign countries, which in most of the cases are not in conformity with the Indian conditions. In order to make them relevant to our conditions, our own national conditions, it is necessary to review the borrowed specifications and standards. But unfortunately, this is not done here. Usually, in Indian machinery, tools, equipment, manufacturers are unable to offer the performance guarantees and assure a high quality. This helps those who are interested in import capital equipment. First, they borrow specifications and standards for the imported items, and they compare the indigenous items with such imported items. Obviously, indigenous items fall short of their expectations, and under this pretext, they usually go in for the imported items. High image of the foreign brand items also creates difficulties in import substitution. Foreign collaborators, because of the nature and commercial compulsions, will seldom like to see the development of indigenous items. With this viewpoint, they keep the licenses and their subsidiaries dependent upon their materials, components, spare parts, technical know-how, etc. This naturally helps them and jeopardizes the efforts for the import substitution. Unhelpful licensing rules and controls really create the problems for import substitution. Such rigid licensing rules and regulations, the government regulations may also have a hindrance over the development of import substitution. So in this session, we have studied about the various methods of entering into the import purchase, that is the steps to enter into the import purchase, and the import substitution and the problems that are faced by the Indian suppliers in case of import substitution.